we'll go ahead and talk about the dimension tool, dimensioning certain elements. So obviously, first off, dimension tool, we grab the standard face of structure dimension. If we're going to dimension from face of structure to face of structure, you could technically click on the node here and the node here that you want to dimension to, double click to place, and place it. Pretty simple. I just threw in some walls, so it's not very precise. Additionally, if you go to the dimension tool settings ahead of time, make sure that you're set to dimension to core of faces. I've actually found this to be a faster way to throw dimensions in, is you just click on the wall, you know it's clicking on either side of the wall, and you could actually add dimensions to a whole bunch of stuff in here. Double click, and then just click on the nodes that you need to eliminate to tidy that up. So there's another method for dimensioning. You could also, just to give like more options out to you, you could dimension to those walls and then deselect the walls that you want to dimension to. Now the downside to this is it could be dimensioning depending on your dimension witness line gap style here, this right here. If it's adjusted to a custom height or to the element, you could end up dimensioning to somewhere in the middle of the wall. Additionally, there are tools where you can select elements and you can say documents exterior dimensioning. And here we can say we want to dimension, let's eliminate openings, we don't have them. The structures are basically the widths of those structures. Here we just want to dimension the overall and then the segments. 18 inches between dimensions at 1/4 inches is fine. And then you could say place on all 4 sides, or you could say place on just individual sides. And if we say okay there, we draw a line orthogonal and then place the dimensions. Oh, looks like it didn't want to dimension those, so we might need to come back in and add those in later. Anyway, so that's another tip on dimensioning. If you have dimensions that are not orthogonal, so you might have buildings that have angled wings to them, that's more and more common. What you can do, you can use the same method. You can dimension here to here, double click, and then if you hover over a vector, sometimes you'll get the parallel option for where it's parallel to. It looks like it wants to place it there. Let's try this. Right, because it could technically be vertical, so you could place, oh, there we go. So I guess if you click on the face of the vector, it doesn't work, but if you click on the individual nodes, I don't know if you could see that, but the cursor has the little Mercedes logo saying that I'm on a vector, and then the parallel symbol indicating that I'm locking parallel to that. So now that dimension is parallel, so that if this were a little bit out of square or something, it's not going to be locking to a random angle like that. Now if we're talking about dimensioning centerline to face of structure, face of finish, right? This is one that comes up a lot. We have to break the dimension out into additional construction methods. So here we have the cumulative method. What this says is basically from the first point to the second point to the third point to the fourth point. So I'm getting 6'4" from this point to this point, 11'11" from this point to that point. So it all starts on that origin point. The only people I know that dimension like that are usually design build guys, the guys that just want to take a string and stretch it out and start snapping chalk lines. But for us, we can use that dimension to say that we have an open circle at the center line and then a tick mark or an open arrow here. So this could go from like center line of fixture to face of finish on an RCP. And it's always going to be the first point that you click on. So if I click here to here, the center line is going to be on this point. I cannot combine these dimensions together, or it's going to basically snap and revert back to that cumulative method. So you do have to have separate dimensions, and then if I wanted to go from face of finish to face of finish, I have to switch back, or sorry, face of structure to face of structure. I have to switch back to the standard dimension type. So you could have multiple dimension strings to make up a string where you're going center line to face of structure to face of structure. Okay. If it's really center line to center line to center line, which we do sometimes, then you just use this construction method, the standard construction method, and set the tick mark type to open circle. Okay. There are also, so we looked at the exterior dimensioning. There's also interior dimensioning standards. That's just, how are we handling columns, endpoints, or center? Are we dimensioning to the core, outer faces, etc.? dimensioning walls and slabs, or all skins. So if we say OK here, it's going to ask for a reference line and a direction. Oh, and then place. Oh, it looks like, oh yeah, I still had that as the open circle. Anyway, I don't know that that's much quicker than just saying I'm going to dimension these 4 walls and then removing, because you still have to clean up and remove the dimension ticks that you don't want. So anyway, there's a few tips and tricks on the dimension tool. Any questions on any of that?
The tool itself. There are instances, I can't come up with an example right now, but I would need to draw some sort of reference line or some sort of thing, dimension to that, and then obviously it's linked to this line that I've made. Is there a way to like unlink the dimension to the object it's dimensioned to, or?
Yeah, there are a few
or
things.
Or sometimes you end up dimensioning to some like other overlapping object, and that object ends up, I don't know, is there a way to just make that dimension live on its own?
There's an independent dimension. You can also hit tab and cycle through whatever you're trying to dimension to. So if I want to dimension to this point and maybe it's snapping to a slab instead of the wall, if I hit tab, it'll go to the next element that overlaps it before I click on that dimension. If you really need the dimension to be independent, you could technically switch it to a static dimension in its settings. Now the danger to that is obviously it's not tied to any element, so if the model moves, that dimension stays where it's at. I have used this in the past if I'm dimensioning, let's say, elevation datums or something like that. Maybe I've got like random header heights on the elevation, I need to dimension those. You can apply a static dimension there. It's essentially the same as if I just click into nothing. This is now a static dimension by default because it's not assigned to anything. And if I want to copy this dimension string from this story to this story, it has to be a static dimension before I can copy paste it. And at that point, like, they can literally rotate at any angle, they can move, they can drag. So this is a static dimension. If I want to reassociate these dimensions to something, you have to basically go node by node, use the pet palette, and reassign it to associate to that wall.
Okay, that's useful. Sometimes you have to brute force sometimes.
Yeah, and then you have to sort of use your own judgment as to whether it's faster to make that a static dimension, copy and paste it into the next view, and then reassign them. Another option is to drop in hotspots wherever you need dimensions and associate dimensions to those hotspots, right? And then that dimension string and those hotspots can be copied. If you copy and paste elements and their association together, they remain associated. So dimension to hotspots might be a better option than static dimensions. It really just kind of depends.
Okay, that's useful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll go ahead and cut